What's going on, everyone? It's Ben from YGO from Zero back with another Retro Yu-Gi-Oh video, and in this video we're going to be diving into some more Fiber gameplay. Now in my last video I showed off the two topping lists that I featured in my guide, and I said that, I just wanted to do that sort of to dip my toes into the format, see what I felt worked, see what I felt didn't, and then make my own changes later. And lo and behold, that's what I've done. So this is my take on hand control. It's very similar to the list from Ellie Tin Can that I showed off in the last video. I just made some very minor changes. I put back in a Change of Heart and a Snatch Steal, as I do think that these cards are so powerful on their own that it's worth playing them, as they can just close out games. I also included a copy of Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer, as I do think it's good just to have a searchable beater in deck off of Witch. I mean, I know that Injection Fairy Lily can serve that purpose, but I think it can be good just to have a monster that can beat over something like a Tomato, or just anything that's a bit beefy. And I chose Kaiku. You could easily choose like Gemini Elf or Bazoo. The thing with Bazoo is it's a lot less powerful this format, as it can only banish monsters. And with your deck as low on monsters as it is, I don't really think Bazoo is too good. I mean, I have it in the side in case, we're up against a deck that's playing a lot of big beaters. But I just like Kaiku and Gemini Elf a little bit better. Kaiku's here over Gemini Elf because I like being able to banish something like a Sinister Serpent from your opponent's graveyard. So I figure that's a valuable use for this card. You could definitely go with a Gemini Elf here instead, especially given like the goal of this monster is just to have like a beater to pump out more damage, get over your opponent's monsters. And so Gemini Elf might be the better choice, as that can get over Kaiku and also crash with a Gemini Elf as well. So I think there's definitely changes you can make to this deck in the future, but this is just sort of an initial take. I wanted to test out Kaiku, see how it did, and I'm altogether not too unhappy with it. Now, you'll also notice that I did cut the Magician of Faith from the main deck, as I feel like this is a bit slow. I also feel like people are playing Noblements of Crossouts and Torrentials, etc., so I don't really feel like there's as much a need for Magician of Faith, and there are just ways around it, so I don't have them in here. I think you could definitely play them, though. They are a very strong card, and there are a lot of spells that you would want to get back. Especially if you're playing hand control, you might want to loop the hand rips. So you could definitely play Magician of Faith if you want. I'm just not, like, the biggest fan of this card. You'll also notice that I put the one knock into the side deck here, as I do feel like it's better just, to know what your opponent's on before going for the knock. I mean, I get how it's an individually powerful card, especially if you are trying to just get in with something like Zalug or Spirit Reaper. You can nobleman an opponent's set and then just rip a card out of their hand. But I don't know. I like it here in the side deck. You can bring it in if you're going second if you wish. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how exactly I feel about this card. I guess we'll have to see in the coming tournaments whether main deck knock is actually worth it or not. But for now, I've got it in the side deck here. Now, I'm just going to go through a very quick card by card. I discussed most of this in the previous video in the guide, so I'm not going to get too deep in the weeds here, especially as this is extremely similar to Ellie Tin Can's list. But first up, we've got 2 Don Zalug and an Exiled Force. This is to pair with our double reinforce the army here to search out any of those monsters. We've got a Fiber Jar, Injection Fairy Lily, Jinzo, Kaiku the Ghost Destroyer, as I mentioned, triple Mystic Tomato. These are very good at fetching out your Witch, Sangan, Donzalug, Spirit Reaper. There's just a lot of great targets for this card. We've got a Sinister Serpent as well. This can come up with Graceful Charity. It can also come up with Mirage of Nightmare, which is very important, and you might see that happen in a lot of these games. It can also break the Yata Loop, which is very nice. And speaking of the Yata Loop, we've also got Yata Garasu to hopefully close out games with that Yata lock. For these spells, we've got a Change of Heart, a Confiscation Darkhold, a Delinquent Duo, Graceful Charity, Harpy's Feather Duster. I was actually debating taking this out, as, I'm not the biggest fan of this thing in formats like Fiber format and before, but I do think that in this format, with so many people playing Torrentials and also Ring of Destruction added to the power traps, I do think that a Harpy's Feather Duster can be a very good inclusion here. We've also got Mirage of Nightmare, insane card. You'll see this card come up in the games that I'll feature here. We've got a Monster Reborn, triple MST. This is to pair with the Mirage of Nightmare, but also just to snipe things like an Imperial Order, etc. We've also got a Painful Choice here, Pot of Greed, Raigeki, double reinforcing the army, as I mentioned, a Snatch Steal, and a Forceful Sentry. For the traps, we've got a Call of the Haunted, Imperial Order, a Mirror Force, a Ring of Destruction, and triple Torrential Tribute. For the side deck, I made some changes. I'm not too sure about this side deck, but there are some things that I do like including in here. King Tiger Wang, is the big one. I have 3 copies of this in case we're up against a deck that's playing a bunch of Scapegoats, or maybe some Mystic Tomatoes and Giant Rats. This can be very good at shutting off your opponent's monsters. We've got a Cyber Jar here if we need more removal. We've got a Bazoo for a similar reason. We've got the double Magician of Faith on the side just to really test, but also if we're up against a slower deck, this might be worth playing. We've got double Gemini Elf in case we need more aggressive pressure. We've got a Heavy Storm and a Dust Tornado for more back row focused decks. We've got double Nobleman of Crossout and a Ceasefire for more flip focused decks. And we've got a Trap Dust Shoot to maybe tech in if we're going first. I don't think this ever comes up in the games that we played, but you could potentially include it. If you have an idea of what your opponent's on and you know that something like maybe, I don't know, Harpy's Feather Duster is not going to be as useful against that deck, siding in Trap Dust Shoot going first can be very nice. But that's going to do it for the deck breakdown. The Fusion deck, it won't matter, so don't worry about that. It's just good to have a 15-card Fusion deck just to bluff to your opponent. I know that at this time in the game's history, you could have an unlimited Fusion deck, but Dueling Book didn't quite allow that outside of the GOAT format lobbies in particular. But that's going to do it for the list. I think this deck is really sick, and I'm excited to be able to show it off. So let's hop into some games. Okay, we've got our first game against Colgate. We're playing the updated hand control list, and I'm excited to get into it. My first video that I showed off, it had a lot of major misplays, and I'm not promising that these games will be perfect, but I hope that I've sort of tightened up my technical play. I do think that I played these a lot better than I had in the past, but then again, when you open up Forceful Sentry Delinquent Duo, it's hard not to play the deck well. So we are going to start off with a Duo. Now, this may be a controversial pick, as I know that, Sinister Serpent's in this format. If you start with Duo, then your opponent can potentially just discard a Serpent, and that would be fine for them. However, it's like, it's not the most likely thing that they'll open it in their opening hand. And honestly, like, forcefuling back a Serpent, I feel like it's honestly less valuable than just going for the Duo and then forcefuling back a really good card that they might have. So that's my philosophy on the whole thing. I know that people will differ on this and fire Forceful first sometimes, but this is just what I do here. And lo and behold, it is somewhat rewarded, as it seems like they don't have Serpent. Yep, they just have a Gravekeepers Assailant. And share if you play. We've got another Gravekeepers game on camera here. This is a deck that a lot of people have been testing out in my Discord, and I see why. It's a very fun archetype to play and sort of to try and break. But I mean, I don't think it's the best, but it's still a very decent contender, probably tier 2. But we're gonna go for a Forceful now, and we see double Gravekeeper Spy in a Morphing Jar. That's kind of unfortunate. Now, we've got the double Torrential Tribute to deal with the Gravekeeper's Spies, though, but this will block us from getting in with Zalug. I honestly think it's better just to send back the Morphing Jar, as if we send back a Spy, they can just get it out off of Spy. I mean, then we can just Torrential that and be done with it, but yeah, I think the Morphing Jar is probably the better pick here. So we will just send back the Jar. We know they've got 2 Spies in hand. And then we're just going to set the Zalug, set a Torrential, pass back to them. This may seem awkward because, Torrential will pop our own Zalug, so that's kind of rough. But, we're not attacking if they set a monster. We're going to fire Necro Valley, so that means that we have perfect knowledge of what they've got, which is pretty good. And we draw a Shenanigans, which is pretty good. We'll set that as well. Trying to bluff that we might not have a TT here. They're going to flip up the Gravekeeper Spy here, bring out another monster off this, and they're going to bring out a Assailant. Now, we could fire the TT here, but we're actually not going to do that, as we do have 2 monsters here to block them. They're going to set another and fire Royal Tribute. This is a very interesting card, but in cases like this, it actually won't end up mattering. I think maybe they should have gone to battle before doing this, as we do have a Sangan set, so they would have been able to sort of, take whatever we get to hand, but they didn't do that, and yeah, they're going to attack in to our set. It's a Zalug. They won't actually get to use Assailant's effect because it only applies on face-up monsters, and they're going to attack into our Sangan as well. We'll be able to get a search here. We're going to grab a Sinister Serpent, and that will keep returning. We can also use this to trigger the Torrential Tribute that we have set, and feel pretty fine about that. We could have gotten a Witch as well to do that, but I feel like Serpent is fine. We're going to go for the Serpent here, fire a Torrential Tribute, and that's pretty good. Also, it's kind of funny because we got Serpent in hand. If they had Royal Tributed in main 2, then we also still would have been able to get it back. So it wouldn't have actually mattered whether they went before or after. But yet another reason to get Serpent. We're then going to set this Torrential, pass back to them, and they're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw Imperial Order. We're just going to grab this Serpent back to hand. We're going to go for the Serpent, just hit in. I mean, if they do have a monster to bring out, we can just Torrential that. So we're not too worried about that. We're going to set this IO, pass back to them. They're going to fire Forceful. We're going to let it happen. I mean, we don't need to fire this Imperial Order now. These cards aren't like the most threatening for our opponent right now. They're nice to have for later, but honestly, we don't really care about using them anytime in the near future. So we'll let that go through, save the IO for a more important activation. And yeah, we draw Dark Hole, which is pretty nice. That's another way to clear the board. And we're just going to keep poking him with Serpent. I mean, this isn't much of a clock. We could have summoned out Fiber Jar as well, just to keep getting in there. But yeah, I think this is fine. We're going to switch the Serpent to defense, pass back to them. We could have potentially fired Dark Hole just to pop their set, but if it's something like Sangan or Witch, we don't necessarily want to do that. They're going to go for an MST, targeting the order. We're going to chain the order to that. They're going to set another pass back to us, and we're going to think about whether to let this order stay or lapse here. We are just going to let it go through. We could have let it lapse and then fired the Dark Hole here. Which maybe would have been the better option, but I feel fine with this. We do have the Torrential Tribute in case they do bring out another monster, so yeah, I feel okay about this. They're going to flip up this Spy, and that's going to be fine with us. They're going to bring out a Gravekeepers Spear Soldier. And here we are just going to fire the Torrential. If they've got another monster in hand, that could be pretty rough for us. Or if there's that is Sangan or Witch, that could be pretty rough for us. But we've got the Dark Hole next turn. And it was a Spirit Reaper, so I'm kind of glad we did that. I mean, we could have saved the Torrential for when they flipped up Spirit Reaper, but I think it's ultimately fine. They're just going to pass back to us, and we're going to think about whether to let this stay or lapse. And we do indeed just let it lapse, as we're just bleeding out life points at that point. So yeah, we're going to set this Sinister Serpent here, potentially trying to bluff something else, but we also don't have the Torrential Tribute to protect it anymore, so I think this is ultimately fine. And they're just going to bring out a Yata. That is fine by us. They're going to Royal Tribute, pitching our Fiber Jar here. And yeah, so now they know that we have a Serpent set, but I think they forget about it. So, that'll just go through. They take 50, and they'll pass back to us. We draw a Painful Choice here, so we're just going to fire that and try and get some monsters here. We send Double Reinforcement, a Jinzo, a Torrential, and a Yata. I think instead of the Torrential, I should have actually sent just another monster here. But I don't think this is the worst. I mean, this keeps more monsters in deck for us to draw later, I guess. And yeah, I think this is fine, but they do give us the Torrential, which does prevent us from actually getting more aggressive here. But this will potentially cut off a later Yata lock, so that's another reason why I'm okay with this trade. And again, we've got more monsters in deck now, and so I think it's ultimately fine. Although the reinforcements were also kind of effectively monsters, so maybe it wasn't worth doing this. But they're going to Comfy, send a Raigeki. We draw a monster, though. That is very nice. We're going to bring out that Mystic Tomato, hit in for 17 here. They could definitely, Dark Hole this or Raigeki this in the future. But we do have a Torrential Tribute, so it won't be bad. Oh, they Delinquent Duo both of our cards in hand, which are very strong. But we're still doing pretty good here. We just sink in 1,700. And yeah, we're chilling. We're just going to pass back to them. They are going to set one, fire Royal Tribute, so they see that we're on Mystical Space Typhoon there. We know that the set is a Yata, and Exiled Force will just wrap this thing up. We don't even need to tribute it to pop their monster. We could just hit in with Serpent and then hit in for 24. But yeah, that's the end of the game there. And I think that game was very interesting for showing sort of how our low monster count can interact with the game. As, we were just sitting on Serpent for a very long time poking in. But that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. We did have ways to cut off our opponent's plays. And so the low monster count didn't really affect things too much except for our clock. So, that's something to keep in mind with these decks. I think that more monster-heavy decks can actually potentially do better in this format, given that a lot of decks are very monster light. But that's just something to experiment with in the future. Now, for game 2, we actually do side in the Nobleman's Crossouts because, Gravekeepers is a very flip-focused deck. So I feel pretty good about siding in those Noblemans. They're going to go for a Pot of Greed there, drawing 2. They're going to set 2, pass back to us, and here's where Noblemen can pay dividends. We're going to bring out this Yata Loop first, just in case they've got like a Torrential Tribute. We're going to fire the Nobleman, and we hit a Sangan, which is very nice. We're going to attack in for 14. We get to discard a card from their hand, and we will hit that one. And it's a Mirror Force. That's honestly pretty good. Good to see that gone. We're going to set an Imperial Order and a Snatch Steal here. This may seem weird, as, why don't we just set the Imperial Order? The reason I do this is in case they've got like an MST, we don't want them to just blind fire that on our IO. And also, if the Snatch Steal does die, Dispel and Trap removal, it's not the worst thing in the world, as it would have done that anyways. They've got the MST, so they will hit the Snatch Steal there, and I feel pretty good about the play that I just made. They're going to set 1, pass back to us. And that's kind of rough. We're just going to switch the Yata to defense, set this Tomato, pass back to them. And they flip up a Spy here. So they will be able to bring out another monster as well. They're going to bring out this Assailant here. And that is fine by us. They're going to hit into this Tomato, which is very interesting. So they are It looks like they don't have Necro Valley, so they are just leaving the Spy up as kind of a liability to the Zalug, but they might have some way to deal with that. So they're just going to set to, oh, Fire Mirage of Nightmare. That's pretty rough. And in draw, we could actually activate Imperial Order to shut off the Mirage of Nightmare. But I don't think that we do it because it's 2 cards. And I feel like 2 cards isn't the worst, and we don't necessarily want to be sitting on this IO, just sort of like paying life points every turn just to keep that Mirage shut off. So I just let that happen. They might also not have the out to Mirage. So yeah, I just let that go through. Maybe this was a misplay, but I mean, we'll have to find out. You can also discard a card from their hand with the Zalug, so that'll be pretty nice, and we will indeed do that. We'll just get in for 200, discard one of their cards, and so that way they'll have to discard 2 next turn. And we hit a Book of Moon. Honestly, not bad. We're going to switch to the Shenanigans defense, set this Mirror Force, pass back to them, and they do have to discard 2 off Mirage, and it looks like they will just let that go through, so it looks like they don't have the out to Mirage right now. They're going to pitch a Spy, and we are also going to hit a Electric Snake. That's very interesting. I mean, it makes sense given that this is a hand control deck. Luckily for us, Electric Snake does not trigger upon being discarded by your own card. So that's very nice. They're going to flip up this Gravekeepers Assailant here and just try and get in. We do have the Mirror Force for this, though, so we will be able to pop both those monsters. They're going to set 2, pass back to us. We draw Forceful Sentry. And, you know, we could potentially IO this, given that, you know, they've got 4 draws off this, which is potentially pretty bad for us. But we are just going to let it go through. Again, if they don't have the out, and we feel pretty fine about this. And I feel like we're in a pretty commanding position. We've also got the Forceful to see if they do draw the out here. So I feel okay about this. We're going to go for that Forceful, and we will indeed get to see what they've got. They don't have an out to this. We are just going to send the Terraforming, actually. This may seem weird, but I figure Terraforming will be more of a brick later. And we don't just want to necessarily let them keep any of these other cards in deck. So we'll send that back, and hopefully their hand will be discarded next turn. I mean, they could have drawn IO here to shut off their Mirage, but yeah, they're going to draw one here, and they don't have the out again, so they will just pitch their entire hand there, and I feel very good about that. They are going to, again, draw 4. We are going to let that happen. And I think I'm also fine with this because I do have Change of Heart here to take their monster. We're going to bring out Yata just to test in case they've got Torrential. And they do indeed have this Torrential. So we will get a search here. And we got to decide what to get with the Sangan. I do just grab an Injection Fairy Lily as I can get in for some major damage. And now we're going to actually fire a Reborn and bring back this Dawn Talu. So we'll be able to hit in for 14 here. Potentially get them to discard their entire hand next turn anyways. So we feel pretty good about that. And let's see what we actually managed to discard here. We hit a... Oh, wow. Oh, that is insanely lucky. We hit a Mystical Space Typhoon, which would have shut off their Mirage. But yeah, that was insanely lucky. Let's just hope they don't have another in hand. And, oh, it looks like they don't. Wow. And they had Electric Snake on top of that. So if we had hit that, that would have been a lot worse. But, wow, that was a... I mean, that was incredible. That was just insane. Very, very good there. They do draw 4 here with the Mirage. And so they will do that now. We're going to hit in for a bunch here. Get in for 14 and pitch. Let's see what we actually hit. We hit that one. Not a bad one to hit. We're going to get in for 34, so they will drop down to 200 life points with Change of Heart in hand. I feel pretty good about this. They're going to draw. They do have the MST for their Mirage this time, but honestly, I'm not sure what 3 cards can actually get them out of this situation. They're going to fire Necro Valley. That is fine by us. They're going to go for Royal Tribute, and they see the writing on the wall. We've got Change of Heart. They can't deal with that. Oh, yeah, and they really can't deal with that because, you know, Ring will not help them in the slightest here. So... very good set of games here. I think that we did sort of tighten up our technical play here quite a bit, which is nice to see. And I feel like it shows how strong this hand control deck can be. Like, I felt very in control throughout all of these games. And maybe that's just because I've also grown more accustomed to playing against Gravekeepers, because a lot of people have been playing Gravekeepers in the Discord lately. But I feel very good about this. But, you know, Gravekeepers, as I said, is probably like tier 2 at best. Let's see how this deck does against a deck that feels a little bit more meta. Okay, we've got a game against Soul65, another very active member of the Discord. Always a pleasure to have them on. We're playing the hand control deck yet again. Let's see if we can pilot it to another victory. And this is a pretty good draw here. We've got Yata, we've got Change, we've got Zalug, and we've got TT as well. So we can get pretty aggressive here. We are going to fire a Change of Heart now, just to see what they've got. We can also get in with Yata, so that would be very nice. And we see that they've got an Injection Fairy Lily. We're just going to go for the MST now. And they actually saved the IO. That is very interesting. But yeah, this was our sort of plan. We, Change of Heart first to test if they've got IO. If they've got IO, I figured they'd chain it to that. If they don't, we can just fire an MST here and clear their back row. But they actually saved it, so very interesting play on their part. And honestly, not a bad one, I think. But this does reveal that they don't actually have any live back row. And instead of bringing out the Yata here and draw locking them, which would have been potentially pretty good, we actually do go for the Zalug. And this may seem a little bit weird, but the reason we do this is actually to get in as much damage as possible, because we don't want them to have more Lily activations. And if we had brought out Yata, they'd be at 4,400. Yes, if they paid for IO, then, they would be below 2 Lily activations, but here we don't actually give them that choice. So we want them on 1 Lily activation just to make things a little bit more easy for us and make things a bit harder for them. So in standby phase, they will let the IO go, so this makes me happy that I brought out Zalug instead of Yata. They're going to go for a Snap Steal on the Zalug, and they're just going to attack us directly. We could... Oh, no, we can't. That's not IO. That's Torrential. So we can't actually do that. We will just, take this damage. Quite unfortunate here. We will lose a card from hand. And honestly, I would have liked to have kept the Spirit Reaper over the Yata, as just setting that and letting Snatch Steal gain us life points every turn would have been pretty nice. We draw an Injection Fairy Lily, though. We gain 1,000, and honestly, I think okay, yeah, I go for the Summon of Lily. I think I honestly could have just set Lily and just walled up behind this. But, that comes with its own risks, and so I feel like it's fine also just to get aggressive here, hit in to their Zalug, drop them down below the point where they can actually Lily again. Now, if they've got Mirror Force, this backfires on us, but not the worst, because, we'll still be gaining life points. But that does go through, so we do actually get to get rid of their Zalug. We've got a Lily in attack with 1 charge remaining. They've got no Lily charges, so I feel very good about this. They're just going to set 1 pass back to us. We draw a Sangan here, and this is a very interesting choice. We're going to go for Sangan. We're actually going to hit over the Lily. Now, the reason we do this is because we want to drop them down to 200, put them dead to a lot of things. Unfortunately, they do have a Scapegoat here, so we do get a little bit punished for this play. We do have a Torrential Tribute, though, to potentially... protect our Lily if they bring in a monster with 2,000 more attack. But those sorts of monsters are a bit rare in this format. So, yeah, unfortunately, they've got Raigeki. So that is a bit rough. We do get a Sangan search here, so we will be able to search out a Witch of the Black Forest, which I feel pretty good about. They're just going to set 1, pass back to us. And we draw a Mystic Tomato here. Now, we... think about what to do for a while here. We could just bring out Witch and attack, but instead we just set the Witch. I think this is smart. Then we can, sort of use the Torrential Tribute to get a search later. So yeah, I feel pretty good about this. And they are going to flip up a Fiber Jar here. Now, this is a bit of an interesting ruling that I'm actually not quite sure of. I think, honestly, I should have chained the Torrential here, because I think that might trigger Witch. I don't know, because what would happen in that case is if I chain Torrential to Fiber Jar, then the entire field gets popped, right? And then Witch will get sent to Graveyard. Fiber Jar's effect will resolve, which will then shuffle everything back in a deck. But I think Witch's trigger will still be met, and thus I'll get a search. I mean, I don't know. Let me know down in the comments below if that is what would happen. Either way, I don't go for the Torrential here, and it might not matter in the end anyways, because yeah, this is really bad for us. If they do just draw a monster that can kill us here, we just lose the game. So, not playing any Karibos, so the Witch Search would not actually really affect things that much. But yeah, I think that it would be good to know for the future, as that is a very interesting thing you can do in response to a Fiber Jar. And it is a case that can come up, as you saw here. So we're going to shuffle up, and this is a pretty good hand for killing them on the crackback, though. They're going to summon out a Tomato, though, attack in for 14, drop us down to 200, which is very worrying. We do know that they do play a Cannon Soldier, which will kill us out of nowhere. They do have the Mirage of Nightmare here to draw a bunch, which is also very unfortunate. They're getting a lot of cards here, and we could potentially just lose the game, which is really bad. We are just going to go for a Reinforce the Army, though, grabbing an Exiled Force to clear the Tomato, and then we're just going to go for Harpies. This is kind of rough, as, they do get to keep the cards they drew off Mirage, but I think we have to go for it, and we do hit a Mirror Force, or not a Mirror Force, well, we do hit the Mirror Force, but Monster Reborn, I think it's the bigger card that we're glad that we got rid of. as then they would be able to, bring back the tomato, and we really don't want that monster on field. We're going to summon out that exiled force, pop their tomato, set 2, pass back to them. If they've got a Harpy's Feather Duster, we probably lose the game here, but we just have to take that risk. They're going to go for a Pot of Greed. Come on. Come on. Let's see what they do here. They are going to think about this, bring out a Yata. We are just going to Torrential Tribute that, as Yata will just kill us. So we're going to fire Torrential. Maybe we should have waited for Mirror Force in the battle phase. But yeah, I'm just killing it now, seeing if they've got anything. They don't have Monster Reborn, but they might have like Premature Burial, which, is a reason to save the Mirror Force. They're going to set 2, pass back to us. I mean, I think we just have to go for game here. We're in too precarious position to not go for game. We're going to bring out that tomato and attack in, and it looks like both their back row are just bluffs. And yeah, they didn't have any way to deal with our board here. So, whew, that is an intense game. But we managed to pull that out by the skin of our teeth. So, again, I think maybe if I had done the Witch play with Torrential, it would have been less close of a game. Unclear. But very, very intense game there, and awesome to see. I did actually side out the Kaiku for a Wang Hu going into game 2, given that, we did see that they were on Scapegoat, and Wang Hu can really put a damper on Scapegoat. So, yeah, we go into game 2 here, but wow, that was an incredible first game. And that's part of the fun of Yata. You get these insane games. So it's really cool to see. They're going to bring out a Marauding Captain, revealing they're on a bit of a warrior package here. Bring out the Zalug as well. Setting 3 and then going for Mirage. Oh, and we do not draw an MST in draw phase. That is kind of unfortunate. So they'll draw 4 here. We're going to go for a Pot of Greed here, drawing 2. And none of those are out to their board here. I mean, they're kind of out. We're going to go for a Reinforcement here, searching out a Zalug. But yeah, this is kind of rough. We're just going to summon out the Zalug, try hitting in, try baiting out some back row, and we do indeed bait out a Mirror Force. We're going to go for a Comfy as well. This way, if they don't have the out to Mirage, or if they just drew it, we can snipe it. It looks like they don't have the out in hand, but they might still have it on field. So we got to sort of play around that. We got to think about exactly what to do here. And we do take the Comfy, just so that way, we don't give them hand knowledge of what we've got. But this is kind of rough. We're kind of screwed in a lot of different ways. Like if we bring out Jinzo to shut off Ring, then it gets Snatch Stealed. If we bring out Lily, then we're in Ring range very easily. Tomato is a very problematic card as well, although we could potentially deal with it with the Mirror Force or the Torrential here. We're just in a very tough spot. We do need to just find ways to deal with those cards there. But they might not have an out to Mirage, so we just got to hope. Oh, well, it looks like they drew the out off the top. That does happen. And yeah, now we're in a bit of a pickle here. They're going to switch the Dawn Salute to attack, just attack in here. We're just going to Mirror Force that, clear their monsters, and then they're going to fire a Reinforce of the army. They're going to grab an Exiled Force here. And looks like they're just going to set 1, set another, pass back to us. That makes sense. They do know about the Exiled in hand. But we draw Duo, so that will be able to shut them off of monsters here. And I feel like it's worth doing. We're going to fire that Duo, discard their hand. And we're just going to set this Lily. Now, we could have summoned out the Lily, attacked in. We would have dropped down to 4,000 in that case, though. And they would have been able to Snatch Steal the Lily next turn. If they had another monster, they could have brought that out, ringed it. And that would have been really, really bad for us. And they would have actually been able to do this in a way that played around Torrential. If they snatched the Lily, attacked the Lily, then summoned out the monster, that would kill us. So, I feel like that was a bit too big of a risk to take, so we just set the Lily. We could have also just summoned this Exiled Force and hit in. I feel like that's not the best use of Exiled Force, though, so we're just going to keep this in hand. They're going to set another, pass back to us, and I feel good about just summoning the Exiled here, popping their set, and we will indeed do that. So we'll pass back to them. They draw another monster, which is kind of unfortunate. We draw a Tomato, which we could potentially bring out and just hit into their set. But if it's Zalug, that's really bad for us. So we don't necessarily want to do that. We're just going to set this Reaper and pass back to our opponent here. They are going to just set another pass back to us. And this is getting pretty bad. We could have also potentially flipped up the Lily, Torrential Tributed, and then summoned out Reaper, just hit in. Or summoned out Tomato and hit in. That might have probably been the better play in hindsight. But, yeah, they're going to flip up this Witch. That's fine by us. They're going to flip up this Tomato. That's also fine by us. And they're going to set 1. They're going to hit in to our Lily here. They'll take 4 from that. They're going to hit into our set here. And that's just Reapers, so they won't be able to deal with that. They do have the Ring to deal with that eventually, though. And it might also be worth just summoning out the Jinzo over the Lily to that way to shut off their ring play, and then they won't be able to do anything with the Reaper. I mean, they could snatch to the Reaper, but then we keep the Jinzo, so yeah, I think that's fine. We just bring out this tomato instead, though, hit over the Witch. This makes their potential, loss from Torrential Tribute a bit more debilitating. So yeah, they draw a Kaiku with the Witch, and they are going to fire a Snatch Steal on our Lily. That's fine. And then they MST our set. Yep, that will probably be the end of the game here. They're going to bring out this Kaiku. They do have the ring to pop the Reaper. And yeah, this will likely be the end of the game. We don't actually take any damage from this because Reaper pops itself before Ring destroys it. So yeah, but they will crash into our tomato here. We're just going to do the tomato war, just trying to stay alive, because there is a potential chance that they drew into something that they might want to otherwise bring out. But yeah, we're just going to do that whole song and dance. They have used up all 3 of their tomatoes. We could potentially bring out another. Oh, no, we can't because it's in hand. But we can bring out Zaluk, which should be able to beat most things that they have in deck. But Cannon Soldier will just be the end of the game, unfortunately. And yeah, we'll take 400 off this Zaluk here. And they'll banish 2. Then they can get in for 34. 14 more, which will drop us down to 800. And then Cannon Soldier will be able to finish us off. So that is the end of the game. I think if I had played that a little bit differently, then things could have turned out probably better for us, but it was tough just dealing with the ring and the snatch steal that we knew about. So maybe also if I had discarded a different card besides Comfy, things could have turned out differently, but yeah, I don't know. It's a bit tough to say. So we will be going to game 3 here. I think we keep the deck largely the same, but yeah, it was kind of a rough loss, but that's one of the nice things about these games in Yata. A lot of the time you play a game and you lose the game, but you know that, if you had played a bit differently, things could have gone a bit differently. We're going to start off with a Graceful Charity here. We draw into the Serpent. Great draw. The reason I went for the Charity is we want to fire Mirage, and I wanted to potentially draw out to Mirage. We do just discard a Lily here. I think maybe I honestly should have discarded the Sangan, as we're going to set our board anyways. And if they do have a Harpies, we could have chained Call to Sangan, and then popped that way. We could have also set Lily as just a 1500 defense point monster. Is decent in this format. So yeah, I think I maybe made a misplay there, but we're just going to set all this as it is and pass back to them. Hope that they don't have a Harpies. If they do have a Harpies, honestly, we're not too torn up about it because we won't have to discard and we'll have gotten cards to hand. But it would have been a lot better here if we had discarded the Sangan, I think. So, you live and learn. They're going to fire a Last Will here. That's an interesting tech card here. They're going to go for a Reinforce from the army here, grabbing an Exiled Force to pop our set monster here. They're going to bring out an Exiled Force, pop the Sangan. We will get a tomato to hand here because, we don't really care about discarding the tomatoes. And Mirage will be discarding cards from hand for us, so I feel like it's fine just grabbing another tomato. They're going to Forceful Sentry here. That's a bit rough. They're going to send back the Torrential, but honestly, that's a bit fine because we do have other back row here. They're going to trigger the Last Will now. Bring out a Witch, which I think is a smart move. You could go all in here and bring out Lily, but that does lose to like Mirror Force or Torrential. And we will just let the Witch go through as is because we could potentially attack over it with 3 monsters in our hand. So we draw the 3rd tomato. Wow. I mean, we'll be happy to discard some of these. We get back the Serpent in standby phase before Mirage goes off. And since we drew 3, our opponent gets to discard 3 from our hand. They hit the Serpent, which is one of the best cards to hit here for us. They hit a tomato, which we're very happy about as well. And lastly, they hit the Exile. The Exile is kind of unfortunate to lose, but honestly, we're not too torn up about that. We're just going to bring out the Zaluk here, attack into the Witch. They do have the Mirror Force for that, but we are going to actually call the Dawn. Now, if they've got an MST here, that's pretty unfortunate for us as they get to pop the call before we get out a monster. But I think we do just want to go for this to just get rid of that last card in hand. They'll get a search off Witch, but we do have Mirror Force to deal with whatever monster they bring out, so I feel fine about this. We do discard before Witch searches, and we hit a tomato, which I'm honestly glad about getting rid of there. They will get a search, and they're going to think about this for quite a bit, as it is an important search here. And they will grab a tomato, makes sense, so that can crash into our Zaluk. In their standby, we will just draw 1, so not the best off of Mirage, but we also only have to discard 1 here as well. So we draw the Dust Shoot, which we did side in because we were going first, so I figured I'd test it out, but I mean, obviously it's not really good here, as they have way less than 4 cards in hand. Luckily, though, they do actually hit the dust chute. So, problem solved. I mean, that's fine. We will go for a reborn here, targeting our exile to pop their set, as we do have the read that it's a tomato, given that they search tomato with witch. We're going to bring out a witch as well, and we're just going to hit in. I think we maybe misordered this. Maybe we should have summoned the witch first, but we figured that they didn't have a torrential, or else they would have used it when we brought back the dawn. So I feel like this is ultimately fine. Both those attacks will go through. We'll pitch a Yata. Honestly, a pretty good card to get rid of, although the Mirage does make it a bit less threatening. We draw a Jinzo off the Mirage, which is very nice. We draw a Forceful as well. And let's see what they hit off the Mirage here. They will hit our Serpent, which is great. We get to add that back to hand now. And we feel very good about that. We are going to tribute the witch for a Jinzo here. Search out a Yata as we feel pretty close to locking up the game. And yeah, we're just going to attack into their set. It was a Zalug, so I feel very good that we did this. We're going to hit in for 14. And now we actually do have the choice about whether we want to mill or not. Now, of course, the risk of milling is if they, send a Serpent, they get back the Serpent, and we basically give them an extra card. But honestly, if they send Serpent, I'm not too torn up about that, because we do have the cards to get over it, and then we've just got Yata in hand as well. So what I really want to do is hit like problematic cards like Raigeki or Darkle, etc. And there are a lot of problematic cards in deck, so I actually will choose to mill, as I feel like the advantages to doing this are a lot better than the downsides to them. So we send a Call of the Haunted and a Scapegoat. Glad I hit the Scapegoat, honestly. That would have been really bad for us. So they will draw here. They're going to fire this Darkle, clear our board. Kind of unfortunate, but we do have ways to deal with this. And we don't actually do anything for Mirage since we had more than enough cards in hand. We're going to fire a Reinforcement of the Army here because we've only got one target left in deck, so we're going to clear that target out. We also only have one Reinforcement of the Army in deck. That's what I decided out to fit in the Dust Chute. So I feel fine about that. And we're just going to get aggressive here with this tomato. In case it is a Zalug, we will just set this Forceful. But honestly, if it is a Zalug, we get to draw with Mirage, so I'm not too concerned about that. It's a Marauding Captain, though, so we will be able to get over that. They're going to set one, pass back to us. We draw a Change of Heart, which is very nice. We can just wrap this game up as long as that set isn't anything. We bring out this Yata, try and hit in. It is a ring, so they'll be able to pop the Yata, which is unfortunate for us. But, we are still getting in for damage, so I feel good about this. We've also got the Change of Heart in hand to deal with what they've got. We could have set the change to draw another card off Mirage, but I really don't think it's necessary at this point. And they're going to go for Pot of Greed, one of the best cards that they could have gotten here. Let's see if it actually gives them anything. They're going to go for a Grateful Charity on top of that. So they're getting to dig deep into their deck. And they've got quite the decision to make here. Off that Graceful. Now, there is a bit of an interesting question with the call, as it did bring back Zalug, and Darkhold pop with Jinzo and Zalug at the same time. So the question is, whether call would reattach onto the Zalug, or it's a bit of a weird question. I think it might be engrave based on rulings at the time. I don't think it matters either way here. We wouldn't have set the change either way, as we don't want to play into like Harpies. But yeah, it won't matter. We don't have like Trunade. Our opponent doesn't have Trunade, so they're going to Snatch Steal our tomato. I think we actually could have won here if we just let this go through, because we've got Change of Heart. We could Change of Heart the Kaiku, attack over tomato, bring out another monster from deck, and we've got Zalug as well. But I go for Mirror Force here. This is, I think, the major misplay that I make here, as we had guaranteed lethal, but we just kind of got too greedy with that Mirror Force. I mean, I think we're still winning here either way, especially when we draw Torrential and we do have Change of Heart in hand. But, I should have just gone for the guaranteed win as opposed to just letting them have another turn. So, there aren't many things that actually do it for them here. But, yeah, we will actually draw another card off Mirage, which is very funny. Not that we really need it at this point. They're going to set one, and we do discard. But we actually will just fire the MST in draw phase to avoid discarding off Mirage, and actually pop their back row. And this may seem a bit weird, as, we might want to pop the Mirage instead because we are discarding here. But I figured we might as well get rid of their last card here, see what it is. And it looks like that will be the end of the game. It was just a Change of Heart, which, they couldn't have really done anything with. If they had Change of Hearted our Don Talug, then, we would have gotten back at the end of turn, so it wouldn't have mattered. So, very intense game. I think that Mirage was an MVP in this final game here. And even though we didn't actually have the out to Mirage, I think it was really, really good. We sort of loaded our hands such that the discards would be a bit more advantageous to us. And I think that's another way you can use this card. And we drew pretty deep into our deck. Although, funnily enough, our opponent wound up with more cards in Graveyard. I think probably because Zalug, and also because they went for the Pot and Gracefuls there. But very, very intense game, very, very good game. I mean, this last game was a bit one-sided, but that can happen in Yata. But unlike in previous formats where I think like the one-sidedness feels just very sacky, I don't really think that this game felt like super, super sacky. I mean, I wasn't Soul, so, you know, maybe if I was on the receiving end of this, that I'd feel like mega sacked by Mirage. But I feel like that was just a very, very fun game in total. And I think that this sort of shows how good hand control can be. I really did feel in control in a lot of these games that I played here. And I feel like it's interesting because this is on the surface kind of like a good stuff deck because it's just playing all the good cards. But now there are enough good cards that tend towards hand control that, you know, hand control has become probably the best deck in the format. But let me know your thoughts on the deck and the games down below. Do you think that, you know, I'm overrating this deck? Do you think that it's actually a lot weaker than I made it out to be? Or do you think that I'm right and that it is just the best deck in the format? Let me know down in the comments below. If you enjoy this sort of content, also please be sure to subscribe. I'm planning on releasing a lot more Yata videos in the future, so definitely look forward to that. But until next time, I've been Ben from YGO from Zero, and I'm signing off.